On August 29, 1949, across a remote testing site in Kazakhstan, the Soviet Union detonated its very first nuclear device. In a single blinding flash, America's atomic monopoly was over. Yet within just 2 years, the United States government would present schoolchildren with a curiously simple solution to the threat of nuclear annihilation. Drop to the floor, crawl beneath a wooden desk, and cover your neck. To modern eyes, it looks like theater or absurdity, but behind the cheerful cartoon mascots and classroom drills lay a profound national anxiety and a Cold War strategy that was much more than a comical exercise. For 4 years following World War II, the United States stood alone as the world's sole nuclear power. The bomb was viewed by American leaders primarily as a strategic asset, something they alone could choose to use or withhold. But late in the summer of 1949, the Soviet detonation in Kazakhstan shattered that security overnight. As historian of science and nuclear weapons Alex Wellerstein notes, the American public was suddenly forced to reckon with a terrifying new reality. The atomic bomb was no longer just an instrument of American dominance, it was now a weapon that could be turned against them. In response, President Harry S. Truman established the Federal Civil Defense Administration, or FCDA. The program's mission was straightforward on paper: educate ordinary citizens on how to survive an atomic attack. But how do you prepare a population, especially children, for the prospect of nuclear war without triggering panic? In 1951, the FCDA turned to Archer Productions, a New York City advertising agency, to produce an educational film for schools across the nation. Shot at an elementary school in Astoria, Queens, the resulting film was titled Duck and Cover. To deliver its message, the film introduced an animated hero, Bert the Turtle, set to a bright, cheery melody. Viewers watched Bert instantly drop to the ground, duck, and retreat into his shell, cover. The moment an explosion occurred. The film alternated between animation and footage of real children and adults, rehearsing these safety measures. In the classroom, students were instructed to dive under tables or desks, or press themselves against walls, tightly covering their faces and the backs of their necks. Out on the street, if no shelter was in sight, children were told to ask the nearest adult for help, and always obey civil defense workers. Most strikingly, the narration framed an atomic blast not as an apocalyptic endgame, but as just another hazard of modern life. It was presented as a danger children could learn to guard against, no different from a house fire, an automobile accident, or even a bad sunburn. To modern audiences, the light, pleasant tone of Duck and Cover can feel deeply jarring. Yet in the early 1950s, the average American knew very little about the physical reality of a nuclear explosion. The FCDA's delicate task was to warn the country without paralyzing its youngest citizens with fear. In schools across America, educators did whatever they could to soften the terror. Historian Joanne Brown has documented how teachers in Detroit would lead songs, tell stories, and play records while students huddled in designated refuge areas. In Newton, Massachusetts, one teacher even decorated the school bomb shelter to look like a cozy reading den. As Alex Wellerstein points out, the juxtaposition of reading storybooks against the backdrop of atomic destruction leads many people, both then and now, to dismiss the drills as useless. Why pretend a wooden school desk could shield a child from an atomic weapon? Yet historians note that in the early 1950s, the drills could have actually helped in certain scenarios. At the time, the Soviet Union possessed a limited number of bombs, and their destructive yield was roughly comparable to the weapons used in World War II, not the massive thermonuclear warheads that would follow. While a desk would offer zero protection from a blast detonating directly overhead, it could protect children from shattering glass and falling debris caused by an explosion further in the distance. As the decade progressed, the scale of the Cold War shifted dramatically. After the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, American lawmakers passed the National Defense Education Act, cementing schools as a critical battleground for Cold War supremacy. By the early 1960s, the arms race had accelerated beyond anything envisioned by Bert the Turtle. In 1961, the Soviets detonated the Tsar Bomba, a 58-megaton weapon with an explosive force exceeding 50 million tons of TNT. That single blast packed more power than all the explosives used throughout the entirety of World War II. Against weapons of this magnitude, the notion that a school desk could save a life became an undeniable absurdity. U.S. civil defense strategies had to evolve. The FCDA, renamed the Office of Defense Mobilization, shifted its focus away from duck and cover and toward the construction of dedicated underground fallout shelters. In the years since, duck and cover has been heavily criticized. Many accused the government of intentionally sanitizing the horrors of nuclear warfare to breed complacency and keep the public passive under the new Cold War status quo. However, historian D. Garrison argues that the drills had an unintended effect. Rather than creating a docile generation, the bizarre ritual of diving under desks helped fuel the anti-war and anti-nuclear movements among outraged parents and the students who lived through them. For those who grew up in the shadow of Bert the Turtle, the drills did not feel like reassuring games. As Alex Wellerstein reflects, many who practiced duck and cover remember being terrified by the experience, a daily physical reminder that the world had become a genuinely disturbing place. In the end, the simple instruction to duck and cover was never just about surviving a blast. It was an entire society's attempt to live under the weight of an unimaginable weapon. If you want to explore more stories of how the Cold War reshaped everyday life, subscribe to the channel and join us in the next episode.